I just got recommended one of the most goofiest horror AUs in my life, which is called the Peppa Pig Outbreak. Peppa Pig is a British animated kids show focused on a young main character named Peppa Pig and her little brother George, family, and friends. Each episode, they're either making fun of their big back father, George is crying over a dinosaur, and of course they're teaching the audience friendship, manners, and a bunch of other things in a fun way. But in the most recent episode of this Peppa Pig infection outbreak, for some reason Peppa Pig's holding a pregnancy test. What? So let's start off from the beginning. Once upon a time, one day, in Peppa Pig's house, Mama Pig comes in the living room and tells Papa Pig, "I'm worried about George, darling." And then we get to see that this is one of those AUs that show us the character's information and status. Her health is at 100, she's almost hungry, almost thirsty, when is she not? Her sanity's at 99%, so she's really doing good, and her stress is at 55, so she's really just worried about George, her son, and as of now, her status is healthy. Daddy Pig is 100% healthy, his hunger is at 0%, that's hard to believe, his thirst is at 50%, his sanity's at 99, and his stress level is completely almost at none. It also mentions that he's not even really that worried by now, and all he has on him are some glasses. And maybe some hidden food. After, when Peppa realizes that her mom is very worried about George, they all start to notice that George hasn't left his room all day since they came back home. And then we see some information about Peppa where it says that she's also worried about George, 100% healthy, 40% hungry, 50% thirsty, her sanity is pretty good, and her stress level's not that high. Now when it comes to her little brother George, everything has a question mark, and everything's questionable about the critter. All he has on him is his dinosaur, and all it says about him is that he hasn't been out his room since going outside. He's been making strange noises. And then there's this eerie photo of George sitting in his room. Now, back in the living room, Mama Pig is telling Papa Pig, "Please check on George, darling." And Daddy Pig, in response, because he's not worried, is like, "All right." And then he goes in his room and sees it's dark in there and hears weird noises and is like, "George?" And then out of nowhere, George just lunges onto Daddy Pig and he starts screaming, "Ah!" And then we get George's actual information. He's in fact infected with some creepy disease that took away his pupils and even has him bleeding out the nose. And his health is at 0%, his hunger's at 100, his thirst is at 70, his sanity is at 0, and his stress is unknown. And he's currently at the stage 4 of the infection, which says run immediately. Basically at this point, George is a walking zombie and it's not safe for anyone to be around him. And Daddy Pig learned the hard way, as we get a status on him and we find out that he's dead. Turns out he was mauled to death and decapitated by George. So in the meantime, while infected George is eating his dinner in the room, Mama Pig says, "Peppa, what did you and George do before coming home?" And Peppa says, "Well," and starts explaining what happened earlier in the day before everyone became so worried about George. And all we know is that they were playing in the mud until they seen another muddy puddle and started playing in that one, jumping around, having fun, until later that day, George started to look a little funny, said Peppa. And if you didn't notice already, in the puddle there are some little creatures, which most likely are the reason behind this whole infection. They might be parasites. And so this is the origin of the Peppa Pig outbreak, where George goes through stage 1 of the infection, where your eyes become red, where unfortunately amputation isn't possible, so he can't cut off any of his limbs to get rid of the infection, and also his health is starting to decline and he's only getting hungrier. And then Peppa says after she noticed that there was something wrong with them, when they got home, George locked himself in his room for 3 hours. And then out of nowhere, George comes lunging into the living room and they all start screaming. And he gets on top of Peppa and scratches her. Now she's infected and it's confirmed that she's going through stage 1. That's when Mommy Pig kicked George upside his head and started dashing towards another room saying, "Hang on, Peppa, I'll be right back." And she quickly picks up some new items, a knife and a gun. And that's when sooner or later, eventually, she comes back into the living room and puts George straight out of his misery with a gun. And you can just tell she's very sad that she had to do this as a mother, but she has to protect both of her kids. And then she says, George scratched you. You must be infected. I have an idea. And Peppa just says, I don't feel good, Mommy. And as she begins to cry, she just says, I'm sorry, Peppa. And then later that day, it's said that they cleaned up everything, including Peppa. And as you can see, Peppa actually got amputated and she's actually healthy and cured of her infection. This is because she was scratched by someone infected. But George wasn't. Remember, he had worms in him. So getting rid of one of his limbs wouldn't be possible. So now that everything is cleaned up, Peppa looks at her mommy and is like, what do we do, Mommy? And Mommy Pig is like, I don't know, but at least we are safe now. And then out of nowhere, the news comes on and they both start looking at the TV, which says, breaking news, a strange infection has been spreading through town. The infection has originated from worms which have recently been dug up from Mr. Bull. Several people are infected already and Dr. Brown Bear is investigating on several subjects. For now, stay away from muddy puddles. And that's when the broadcast ends and Peppa looks back at her mom with no clue on what they're gonna do now. But her mom seems determined and says, we must go help our friends. Pulls out her weapon and says, let's go. Then when she goes outside, there's a lot going on. It's daytime, but it seems like it's night because there's so much bombs going off. So there's clearly a whole war zone going on outside. So Mama Pig is like, stay close, Peppa. And she's like, this is awful. And that's when a stage 4 infected pulls up and gets shot down immediately by Mommy Pig. And Peppa seems really sad that she lost one of her friends. And her mom reassures her that I'm sorry, Peppa, but you're the only thing I have left. And I'm not about to lose you. And that's when out of nowhere, Peppa Pig's mom gets a call, and believe it or not, it's Miss Rabbit who's asking if she's still alive, because it turns out she's looking for as many survivors as she can, and she wants them all to go to her house in the burrow underground where it's safe. And Mommy Pig is like, we're on our way, Miss Rabbit. Let's go, Peppa, for Daddy Pig and George. Finally, they arrive at Miss Rabbit's house in her underground bunker and everyone welcomes them. And Mommy Pig says they're thankful but asks, so what's the plan? And Miss Rabbit says, there's no plan. We're gonna stay here in quarantine safely from the infected. And Mommy Pig doesn't seem too happy about that and says, I'm sorry, Miss Rabbit, but I can't do that. My husband and child are dead. I'm not gonna be afraid of those demons. And then out of nowhere, Peppa Pig interrupts, changing the subject and says, Miss Rabbit, is Susie Sheep here? And that's when she's told, sorry, the sheeps haven't even shown up yet, and we can't even get a hold of them. And Peppa gets really upset about this, and rightfully so, because Susie's one of her best friends, and I can't imagine how she's gonna feel if something actually happened to them. So after everything Mommy Pig has been through today, she tells Miss Rabbit, I'm sorry, but I'm gonna have to save my friends. And that's when she's told, you're gonna get yourself killed out there. And she says, which is why Peppa's gonna stay here, and I'm gonna go save the sheeps. And in the next scene, she's in the car and on her way to the sheep's house. And when she finally arrives at Miss Sheep's house, she knocks on the door, yells her name, but doesn't get a response. So she ends up going inside and says, Miss Sheep? And then there, she runs into Miss Sheep in the kitchen, who's clearly been feasting on Mr. Giraffe's body. Most likely the poor giraffe came to check up on her and didn't make it. But anyways, Mommy Pig looks at her in her eyes and says, looks like there's only one thing to do. And before she can even shoot, she gets completely blitzed and the monstrous Miss Sheep lunges on top of her, screeching out loud, and then out of nowhere gets shot in the head by someone other than Miss Pig. And from the window, it's actually Miss Rabbit. And Miss Rabbit comes in and says, wow, I haven't made a shot like that since I was in the military. And Mommy Pig is like, but what are you girls doing here? And Miss Rabbit basically tells her that she was right and they should be helping instead of hiding. And then Mommy Pig says you shouldn't have brought in Peppa, but Peppa says, no, I want to save Susie, who ends up coming out of nowhere but is infected. And right when Peppa says, oh, don't worry, Susie, I'll give you a band-aid so it doesn't hurt anymore, Peppa's mom just straight up cuts her arm off and says, I'm sorry, Susie. And that's when Peppa Pig starts oinking and laughing and saying, we have matching arms now, look, which is definitely something that would happen in Peppa Pig, if I'm not gonna lie. But anyways, to continue, they all get into a car and start heading somewhere, which is actually the hospital where Dr. Brown Bear is and his patients. And when he asked what they're doing here, they basically tell him that they're in charge of all the survivors and want to know any information that he's found so far. And he doesn't really trust anybody, but since Miss Rabbit has helped him in the past, he gives him a pass. One thing to know about Miss Rabbit is that she's basically worked every job in Peppa Pig. But anyways, going forward, Mr. Brown tells them that almost under half the town is infected, and the government is considering quarantining the whole town because they don't want it to get out to the whole world. They also found out that the origin of this infection are from underground worms that Mr. Bull dug up. And when they asked where is Mr. Bull since he's patient 0 and the first infected, they said they don't know, but he's spreading the virus around to everyone. And they currently are trying to work on a cure, but the problem is they need a blood sample from patient 0, which is Mr. Bull. And that's when Mummy Pig says, you can trust us for that. We're gonna beat this infection. Don't you worry. And then they leave the hospital and go back to the hideout where they tell Peppa and Susie to stay while they go find Mr. Bull. And this is a part where you start facepalming yourself and start to get really worried because ain't no way. So after Miss Rabbit and Mommy Pig leave, the kids start coming over to Peppa Pig and Susie and say, I want to go get my teddy, I left it at home, and plan to go on a secret mission to retrieve the teddy bear and take one of the cars because the police are out and worried about the infected so they won't get caught. And even though that's a smart idea, it's still a dumb one. So all the kids go outside and as you can see, it's dark time and they're screaming, let's go! Look, it's parked down the hill. And they all squeeze and get into the car and the wolf is like, I think I can handle driving. And eventually he does start driving down the road and that's when they run into some infected. It's Mr. Fox and they start saying things like, is he eating a rat? Everyone careful, run him over. I don't think he saw us. And Peppa Pig starts to think, this is awful. But Susie reassures her, don't worry Peppa, Mummy's looking for a cure in Mr. Bull. And luckily, they all get to the house in one piece and they start to go upstairs where Teddy's at. And they actually do get Teddy. But then they start hearing sniffing from downstairs, loudly. And Susie's like, Peppa? I think someone's in the house and he can sniff us, and it's Mr. Fox. Meanwhile, while Mommy and Mrs. Rabbit are looking for Mr. Bull, they decide to go to his house, but also have to stay alert because there's infected all around town. And then eventually they finally arrived there on foot and probably didn't take the car because they didn't want to alert any infected and have them follow them there. And that's when out of nowhere they hear a loud scream from outside, and it's Susie Cow saying, help me please, I'm in pain, and immediately gets shot down by Peppa Pig's mom and says, not for long. Then Miss Rabbit says, Mr. Bull probably got her, let's go. Then immediately when they get inside, they see things they don't want to see and eventually hear groaning from upstairs and say, that's him, and go upstairs into the attic. Eventually when they get up there, Miss Rabbit is scared and that's when Mommy Pig notices something written on the wall saying, help, get out, the worms are everywhere. This was clearly written by Mr. Bull. And then out of nowhere, they hear a noise and see something eventually poking from outside of the closet. Now immediately, both of them get scared because this is an infected that they've never seen before or encountered, as he's on a different level of stages. So Mommy Pig says, turn off the lights and hide. And Mr. Pig comes out the closet groaning super loud and huge. And as they're hiding, Miss Rabbit whispers to Mommy Pig saying, Mommy Pig, let's go. No, I need its blood. And that's when Mummy Pig shoots at him, but she actually misses, making him angry. So Miss Rabbit jumps in front of her and tells her to run. And she doesn't really trust her at first, but says, dang it, I was in the military, get out of here. And all she hears is screams as she's walking away from a distance and says, I'm sorry. Back at the house where the kids are, Mr. Fox is downstairs sniffing them out and will eventually be upstairs to devour them all. So they're all panicking, asking Peppa, what do we do? He's gonna find us. Now who knows why these kids would put their life in danger for a teddy bear? And I don't agree with spankings or whoopings, but this might be the perfect time for it to shine. And that's when Peppa says, everyone get under the bed. And of course they all can't fit under there, and that's when Zoe the zebra takes out a gun and they all prepare for his entrance. And when he comes in, they all start screaming and they yell for Zoe to shoot him as he starts mauling their friend. She's like, but it's Freddy. And they're like, for God's sake, just shoot him. And they ask Pedro if he's okay, and he's just like, I'm just a little shaken up, and they all decide, let's get out of here. And as everyone leaves the room, Pedro's the last one to leave. And meanwhile, downstairs, they're talking to each other, asking, where should they go? Should they go back to the shelter? And one of them's like, no, we need to go leave town to ask for more help. And that's when someone's like, wait, where's Pedro? And all they hear is, I'm right here. I feel so good. And immediately, one of the kids pulls out 2 guns and says, go to the car, I'll keep him occupied. And they're like, Danny, are you sure? And he's like, go now. And while he's alone, he says, I'm sorry, Pedro, I have no other choice. Meanwhile, back in the car, they don't even wait for Danny to leave the house and come outside. They just drive off saying, we should have never left Danny. And that's when Susie's like, don't worry about that, Peppa. Let's just focus on getting out of town. Besides, Danny is tough. He can handle himself. Oh, he got handled all right. And this is when things even get worse, because as they're leaving the town, they find out that the government put signs all outside the town saying that this town is now quarantined and no one can leave. And now they don't know what to do until out of nowhere they hear groaning, and it's Mr. Bull running right towards them. And he bites off one of their heads and they're all screaming, no! And before he can bite off Peppa's head, someone says, not my daughter. And he gets shot in the foot but flees before anything else can happen. And that's when Mummy Pig asks what the heck they're doing out here. And before she can get the full story, someone points out that they finally have a sample of Mr. Bull's blood. And they all leave after saying goodbye to poor little Richard. When they're all in the car, the plan is to get the blood samples to Mr. Brown. But when they arrive, something's off and there's blood all over the ground. So she tells the girls to stay very close. And when they get inside, the place looks completely run down and almost abandoned. And there you see Pedro, who's infected, is eating Mr. Brown. And right before he feasts on everyone else there, Peppa Pig is told to run away with the samples. And Peppa's like, but Mama Pig is not playing no games anymore. So she yells at her and tells her to go now. And when they all leave, she says, I don't think so, you little shh. Meanwhile, while the kids are outside, they're all confused on what they should do now because the infected could be anywhere. And then out of nowhere, Miss Rabbit pulls up saying, Peppa, and then she gets told that Mr. Bull is dead. And eventually tells them that we don't have time for any of this, we need to get out of here now. And while they're in the car, they're asking Miss Rabbit where they're going, and she says, we're going back to their bunker and we're never leaving again. And that's when Peppa starts to argue with her and saying, no, we need to go get these samples to a doctor, and plus, I'm not leaving my mummy. You just sat here and ruined everything tonight, and you think you have a say in anything that goes on? The audacity! But moving on, Miss Rachel, something weird happens with her, and she changes a whole different color, and everyone starts to realize this and says, Miss Rachel, is everything okay? And there they realize Miss Rachel is gone. Then in the next part, we see a hand with a pregnancy test in their hand. Now, most likely this is Peppa Pig's mom because she is pregnant in the show, I guess? But that's all we know so far because it's just a teaser for the next part. And I also can tell that you're just gonna miss out on the next part because you're not subscribed and you're still sitting here watching this. Now, while you're down there subscribing, make sure to check out the description and make sure to comment the next video you want me to cover. God bless all of you people, ladies and gentlemen. See ya.